Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Synthesis with the School of Smirk, where we discuss the functions and the nature of art and religion, where learning about their fundamental nature and functions, we bridge the gap between them. We synthesize them. We find out how the one exists in the other. Um, that the teachings of religion and all spirituality, metaphysical thought, are and can be found and are inherent in the behaviors and nature of art itself. That when we understand this, we can more readily utilize and comprehend art to achieve and to achieve the religious function and interact with religious creation, with these messages that are passed from across time, regardless of what exact God system or spirituality um, they're from. So we do this. I try to offer you many different examples of a piece of art, piece of metaphysical thought, or a religious creation to synthesize them to help you see what they share, because this allows us to interact with both of them more readily, to understand how to use both of them, to get to use art to express or to comprehend this vast breadth of resources, which is artistic creation, and to get to interact with and utilize the messages of religion just as much. And when you do, to see that you'll want to express it using that art that you've gained access to. And really, we synthesize art and religion. We connect these two. We help you to understand how to use both of them and why they exist, because all people are able to use both of these for their benefit. They're able, all people is part of our shared nature, our species particular conditions, awarenesses that all of us have, which are all you need in order to use art, whether to express yourself uniquely or comprehend unique expression from someone else. And it's what you already have is all you need in order to understand how religion works, to get it to work for you, and to use it for interaction in your everyday life. Everyone of every type, place, culture, creed, um, time, training, knowledge, education, whatever it may be, circumstance, are able to use art and religion. And when we synthesize them, when we find out the messages, the ideas, the concepts which pervade them, which go through both of them, the teachings of one inherent in the behaviors of the other, we more readily understand, we begin to understand and gain autonomy, autonomy being self rule, the ability to choose to do something yourself, to use them for a more valuable, nourishing, meaningful interaction in our everyday lives. So, I've been trying to make these videos shorter, um, maybe to make them more approachable examples of a bigger idea. Uh, so let's see how that goes. Today, I just want to try to, as briefly as possible, explain a metaphysical premise. That's what we often do. I present my own, using my own language, developed vocabulary of metaphysical terms and concepts. I offer you some sort of metaphysical premise and then show you how it makes its way through some sort of possibly religious or mythological god system creation, and how it makes its way through and interacts in an artistic creation, how both of them possess this in one way or another, and in that way how all three support and confirm each other, give us a multiplicity of aspects from which to understand these fundamental concepts about the nature of humanity and the nature of the universe, um, the most beneficial interaction types and concepts for our species, and so um, how to understand how to use, again, art and religion for yourself, and any of my perspectives for yourself. The multiplicity the confirmation from many aspects is something that makes more sympathetic these concepts that we're looking at, which can be difficult. So let's start by offering the metaphysical premise. If you make a 2D cross on a piece of paper, there is a point where the horizontal and vertical lines meet. At that point, you cannot tell, and it is neither and both from the top, from the left, from the right, from the bottom. At the very center of the cross, the part that the Celtic cross circles, there is a point of indefinableness. There is a single point which is the center. It is coming from the top, it is from the left, it is from the right, it is from the bottom, and it's none of those, and it's all of those. This is a approachable, widely viewable and understandable, accessible instance of infinity, a manifestation of infinity in our approachable mundane world. Another example um, might be an example like a, it might be something like a paradox. If a Cretan says all Cretans are liars, you find yourself in one of Hofstadter's strange loops, this loop that is infinitely, limitlessly repeating. Well, if the Cretan is right, is telling the truth that all Cretans are liars, then he's telling the truth, which, and if he was telling the truth, then he's lying that all of them are liars. And if he's lying, then he's telling the truth that all Cretans are liars. And you see that this loop keeps going. If you, let's just give you one more example, because what we're doing is we're showing, giving evidence of the fact that all humans take account of, we recognize limitlessness, the manifestations of infinity in our reality. And that, next to, juxtaposed with, combined with our awareness of irrefutable particularity, is what is specifically possessed by humans, which is therefore specifically what we have the opportunity to engage, what we're designed to engage, what we're designed to use when in interaction with our surroundings, as they are our recognized surroundings. We recognize and are aware of irrefutable particularity and infinity. And it's these which are we're designed to use, which we have the capacity to use, which we can use for different types of gain, nourishment, receipt from interaction with the world around us. And yet also what we have, which, if are not engaged, can be problematic, can find them as they find themselves in contradiction. Our lack of engagement of both of them often leads to a lack of nourishment in the distinct manners of nourishment that having both of these, our organism and physiology expects. Um, Much like a bird, if it didn't use its wings, would find its wings these have this heavy baggage that it had to carry around with its weak legs as it walked around the ground, vulnerable and unable to reach most of what its physiology is meant to receive from the trees, from the air, the surrounding that it recognizes and knows how to manipulate and move through. So we said that the 2D cross is an embodiment of indefinableness. How about instead of the cross, which can be understood as, I mean, the cross is actually the swastika from Mesopotamia, but any instance of this 2D cross is an indefinableness. How about the indefinableness is in transition, Hermes? Hermes embodies all transitions, the exchange of hands, one thing going into another's hand. The thief who removes one thing from the possession of another, another exchange, even though it wasn't consensual. Um, how about the passing of a message? He's the god of the messages too, sending the energy of self from one into the other, and it's when it receives, when it actually there's a moment when it passes and is received in the mind of the other. This is, of course, an instance of energy equivalence, which is another implication of infinity in this transition. But also the psychopomp. There's a moment when we go from wakefulness to sleep. There's a moment when we go from aliveness physical to death physical. And these are all instances which are approachable, which everyone can experience, and can. It's a really accessible, approachable way for everybody across a very wide range of humans across time to recognize instances of indefinableness in transition, which is also what the prayer hands are. In transition, there's one moment, or there's one place where the one hand ends and the other begins. And at that place, indefinable, ultimately a place we cannot ever tell, there's one atom molecule where it's the one hand, one where it's the other, and that yet they're touching. And so they're both at some point right at that indefinableness. That's where is this example, a manifestation of infinity in our approachable reality. You can always instigate it by going like this, hence the prayer hands, where there's a manifestation of infinity that we can understand, that we could use to try to justify in self the existence of infinity in our reality. The existence of infinity despite our awareness of this uniqueness, which seems to contradict it. In fact, it does not. Uniqueness is just an irrefutably particular way of being related to all other things in a context where all other things are changing. They're infinite, limitless. And so we are both unique, specific, but infinite too, in that we're ever changing. It's always changing, a limitless specificity. So, all the transitions of Hermes, and as we can see in the prayer hands, which have been used across all religions, are manifestations of this place in transition, the transition between any two things, where there's always this one point of indefinableness, where one thing begins and the other one ends. We can never quite point out, and those places, even if you could, with some sort of hyper analysis extension of the invariably lacking senses, there's always this point, even if you did go with analysis and found out, oh no, this one technically ends here and this one technically ends here, well, then you've lost the opportunity in this indefinableness. But there are so many examples, and ultimately many unprovable ones. But regardless, this is not about being proven. It's what these are all things that can help us to justify in ourselves whatever we need to justify in ourselves that we live in a place where infinity or bothness, indefinableness, unknowableness, these manifestations of infinity exist. Because it's when we do that, when we justify in our consciousness, therefore reconcile in the way that I showed you how uniqueness and infinity can exist together, that we come into the most nourishing and beneficial interaction using our wings, using both the left and the right capacity, the awareness of uniqueness, coming into interaction with the tangible, approachable, specific, irrefutably particular, and yet in a way which knows that irrefutable particularity is infinite, is limitless. And it's then knowing the infinity that we're all part of, that we're at one, that we're part of a miraculous, limitless whole, that we come into the praising, rigorous interaction, observation, the complete selfless giving, knowing the deathlessness that is that we come from, are in, and will return to the same thing that we're all part of. We begin to give selflessly to others, um, to come into an interaction that uses all of our awarenesses, the awareness of infinity, the awareness of uniqueness, to come into an interaction with our surroundings that utilizes and engages all of our awarenesses regarding those surroundings, that uses our wings to fly and to interact and give to the world around us in a way which can receive limitless knowledge from it. Selfless, unassuming, praising interaction leading to the revealing of knowledge, of meaning, unique light, truth of self, which is self as it is selflessly related, and that is as it is in the infinite plexus, selfless. And that way that we are in the infinite plexus is always changing. And so we reveal the unique light, the meaning which is new, our irrefutably particular way of being related to any other that we interact with, of any kind, state, or nature, in each coming moment, always changing. So it's an endless path to completion of self, to increase of meaning, to redefinition of self, to increase in knowledge, to sustainable connection to others. When we do reveal this way of being selflessly related, what we reveal is unique light, the fruit of religion, having justified, managed a way to autonomously come into selfless interaction with them, um, which reveals our way of, again, being selflessly connected. We reveal something which consciousness can witness. It's the result of its patterns and our patterns finding meaningful identification, which is what consciousness is. Um, Finding meaning between the fundamental patterns, relationships, and things. And so when we look in this selfless way, what we reveal is a synergistic product, a psychoenergetic phenomena, a thought, which is that which was ourselves and the other when connected selflessly, as they are infinite, ever changing, irrefutably, particularly related. And that is one thing, which means it's the meaningful occurrence which is part of its truth. That tree resulted in this when this being interacted with the tree in that way. It is both of our truth. It's the truth of what happened when we both were in that interaction. And that is an additional truth that redefines the tree by adding that truth to the tree's existence and to our existence too. And in this way, it transforms the one into the other. And this is why metamorphosis, transformation, is the archetypal goal or end product of the Greek mythology. The revealing of unique light, which, redefining both of us, sustainably connects us, transforms us the one into the other, um, nourishes us with the new meaning, the redefining truth of self, removes self doubt, gives an example. That meaning is the Holy Spirit. It's the thread when all things are treated as sacred. It's the thread or the air which gains meaning in addition to the unique light, when all things are treated as sacred, as if they're in an infinite context. And that is an instance, one thread of how we exist, witnessable by consciousness in the infinite plexus. So it reconciles us. And once we gain it, once we redefine, when we look back out upon the world, upon everything around us, we find that um, we find all things to be redefined as again, and this is where we're going to get into our discussion of art. I apologize, I have to give you the full metaphysical rundown here, but these are my metaphysics. This is what I'm passing through art and religion. Um, when we receive this unique light and are redefined, transformed, shared truth with the other, revealing the Holy Spirit, that meaningful air which connects us, which can be revealed to consciousness when coming into this selfless interaction, um, and revealing the ever changing, irrefutably particular way of things being related in the infinite plexus. When we have justified or reconciled in consciousness infinity using one of these examples, like the cross's indefinableness or the indefinableness or unknowableness in transition through Hermes, whatever it may be. Um, it's when we reveal that light and are redefined ourselves that we look out upon the world and we find, here it is, that all things are redefined. All things gain new values and meanings, truths and appearances, purposes, functions. Um, all things are redefined in this sort of this cascading, what's in literature psychological flight. It's this cascading sort of effortless, and this is why effortless is associated with a lot of these discussions, um, witnessing of how all things, the entire plexus of relationships, which are the truths of all things, gain new light, gain new significance and meanings and values and truths. Um, and this is the experience of paradise on earth. This is the highest interaction. This is what happens when consciousness possesses this unique light and casts it out upon the world, knowing that it was selfless interaction that resulted in this nourishing, reconciling, transforming, um, redefining increase. It casts this light out upon the world and watches all things sort of effortlessly shift and flux. We see that the newness that we brought about instigates this great redefinition of all things that we can witness. Um, and this redefinition is the change, which is the highest interaction, which is life itself. For humanity, for the one whose species particularity is the ability to see infinity and uniqueness, this is the interaction, which is our potential, our highest potential, our complete engagement of that which we particularly are, and therefore it is human life. It is human particular survival. Um, and it's this which is the increased communication, the support, the increase of knowledge, the rebirth, the rejuvenation, the inspiration, that is the breathing in, the uh, the stimulation, the engagement, the change, the interest, the fascination, all of these things, the accompaniment, the camaraderie, the chatter, which um, all manifest in different artistic and religious texts as paradise. This is paradise on earth when you live in a situation so nourishing and supportive and connected, reconciled, and having relieved all self doubt, having revealed your unique light, your irrefutably particular truth of being related in the infinite plexus at a given moment. Um, and we see one of the big connections here that I want you to keep an eye out for is that it is the truth of things and the way that things gain meaning and therefore pass meaning, or the way meaning can be perceived, or the way meaning can be expressed, unique meaning, is by relationship. It is our irrefutably particular way of being related that is our uniqueness. In a plexus, in some context, some plexus, it is the relationships between all things which gives them their truth and which gives meaning that can be identified by consciousness between them. We'll see that this is the metaphysical principle which art embodies and can be engaged specifically, this one engaged in certain ways with certain aspects of art, the variables and the relationships between certain aspects of the constitution of art, whether it be the subjects or the contexts or um, the means to expression within it, which um, can lead to unique expression or the preservation of unique light. Um, let's see. So let's get into it just to keep going. I have one more thing that I wanted to say, but I can't quite recall at the moment. So let's take a quick look at Cubism, the birth of Cubism, and the African mask. So Picasso, hold on, I want to remember something. Maybe I'll just finish the previous thought by saying that the witnessing, I remember, the witnessing of the redefinition of all things, the gaining of new values and um, truths and potentials and functions of all things, which results from unique light received, redefining self, and then being cast out upon the world. There, all things being redefined sort of effortlessly in a cascading interaction called change, the highest aliveness, um, which is that same one that we see is the means to expression in art, um, which differs from period to period, its particular profundity of engagement, but also the way that it's engaged, which parts of the constitution of artistic creation um, are used to take advantage of this limitless metaphysical potential. Um, I wanted to give you one example, and this is why I took the moment to remember um, of how to understand or a way to identify with this seemingly mysterious psychological flight, the redefinition of all things, which can also be understood as watching the reharmonization of all things being affected by a newness entering. An analogy is if you have a bucket of water with 10 drops of water in it, and you add one, all the previous drops become 1/11th. All of them are redefined by the addition of one new drop. Um, Even though the new thing is just the drop, all things are redefined by adding a newness, um, which an implication of infinity. Um, and we can think of this as the human consciousness is only way to see, or a manner of witnessing the whole, or an infinite or a limitlessness. Um, Basically, gaining um, empirical evidence, internal, ready to recall internal justification, um, that can lead to autonomous perpetuation of the interaction which reflects reconciliation of infinity and consciousness. By having experienced and confirmed this witnessing of the whole, this witnessing of the value, the use of limitlessness, the limitless knowledge and information and interaction which occurs when we review the unique light, we can all the more readily, we have all the more confirmation and readiness to autonomously continue to act in a way which reflects the implications of infinity being justified in consciousness and reconciled with uniqueness. And so the example of this psychological flight, this cascading increase, effortless and rebirthing, as all things gain a new truth, which is a new thought or a new light. So we essentially enter into a new universe, just like when we were born. And this is rebirth, metaphysical. Um, but what I wanted to offer you to make that a little bit more approachable is this idea that, well, perhaps you've experienced it. If you find out, it's similar to this experience, finding out 10 years, 5 years, 1 year later. Um, hmm, what's an, it's a good example. If we find, yeah, unfortunately, it's going to have my fiction is going to have a negative character just because it's the one coming off the cuff and I want to move on. Um, you have a roommate. Um, Eventually, the two of you move out, and a year later, you discover that that roommate was, for the last year of your living together, a drug addict, somebody addicted to, let's say, some drug, but they were hiding it and functional. Um, you didn't know, and you lived that year knowing them, knowing yourself, and existing. A year later, a year after you guys move in different directions, you discover, you reveal the light, you gain the thought, the additional piece of information, the increase in meaning, that you find out that person was addicted to heroin. I don't know, some drug. All of a sudden, your mind, and this is the analogy, your mind sees, and it's psychological phenomenon, it's a memory, but still a world of relationships, um, all of your remembered experiences from those places and that person in that context. It's the same as an abstract context, like the canvas that we paint onto. It's the same as the beginning to the end of the elapsing time of a piece of music. It's the same as the universe. Your memory of that context, psychological phenomenon of yourself, that person, and all the other variables inside of the context of total experience inside of the house with that roommate for that year. There's your abstract context. This new knowledge, this, let's say the analogy to this unique light, this informedness you receive that they were a drug addict, all of a sudden redefines, adds meanings to everything that was within that um, that abstract context. Things that you brushed aside, noticed but didn't care about, that didn't mean anything at all, that meant something. All of them change. All of a sudden you realize, oh, that's why they were doing that. Oh, that's what this was. Oh, I remember finding blah, blah, blah in the drawer. All of a sudden, things that meant nothing gain a ton of meaning. Things that you thought meant something were nothing. Why did they keep wanting to hang out at this time and not this time? Why did I liked this and then all of a sudden it totally changes why what it meant? Oh no, I shouldn't have liked that. This thing meant that. That's why they were doing that. I thought this was a good thing, but in fact it was a bad thing. Everything changes values and meanings, and this is kind of how that works, and also how it works in art. How this newness, the uniqueness, changes, redefines the plexus, and it's by this metaphysical principle that all things are only what they are as an irrefutable particular way of being related, um, which is what makes the bridge between this metaphysical process, which can be expressed in many different ways in different religions, trying to pass you the paths to, like the cross and the hermetic transition, in order to give you paths to justifying in consciousness infinity. Um, this metaphysical concept that all things in an infinite context must be only defined by their relationship to each other. We are only everything that we are not is a negative way of looking at it, but um, is what bridges our path to art, how art expresses, how to comprehend art, how you can use art by understanding its fundamental nature. Any technique without any amount of training. Um, so, okay, let's take a look into Cubism a little bit. Something I'll discuss in many different videos, presumably, is the fact that each style, each period or style or epoch of creation is instigated by the re-recognition, by the clarifying, by the sudden receipt of a metaphysical principle, of some idea like this, which becomes the direct path, the most immediate and accessible, sympathetic path to artists accessing limitlessness in and through the abstract world, understanding readily how to access the infinite or include the infinite into their abstract artistic contexts, which is the function of art, it's the purpose of art, in particular to allow into human expression. And when it is found, it is often found because it's because of all the metaphysical messages from the past, from artists seeking within their own techniques how and why to do what they're doing, there being sufficient messages from the past to help guide them to seeing these things. The previous period, those who most clearly embodied and taught essentially the next generation, showing them that there's some metaphysical principles behind this, and all of it leading to usually actually the reactionary shunting or removing of the previous one. They don't want to, they don't, they know that they don't uniquely or intrinsically understand the one that made sense previously because that one came from the one before it. And so seeking, knowing that there is something to seek, having the metaphysical message, having the guidance that they should be using some larger concept, the next one of the next artists who has proper education, the right mindset, the right mother, um, manages to reveal a way, a metaphysical principle which makes their art limitless, and they begin to create art which does not abide by the previous rules, although that's not at all the intention or the purpose. It's not reactionary, uh, it's not being obstinate or anything. It's actually a way that it's just a way of um, ex- express. It's a way that they realize that they could express in a way which has no limits, um, which they realize is the path to being able to express what is irrefutably particularly theirs at all times, at all costs. It's just part of their resources, and they will do anything in order to continue to use it. It's so let's let's just talk about it a little bit so you can get a handle on what I mean. So Cezanne is putting forth that there must be some sort of like unifying concept, a central point, um, a perspective only by color relationships. Both of these are just sets of in all completely interconnected relationships. It shows there's this oneness that's crucial. That the truth, the pure vision, what the artwork must be in order to come alive, to actually interact with the individual, to have a unique experience, is to look at things as they are in a world where things are just fundamental relationships, isomorphic. Only then can they move into the abstract and be set into process. Um, and so, surely Picasso, who calls Cezanne the father of us all, um, knew that, but was seeking, of course, like I said, his own ways to put the truth, to put limitlessness, the limitless, ever changing truth, his unique experience, which, being irrefutably particular, is infinitely specific. Irrefutable particularity, uniqueness has is a manifestation of infinity. It has infinity inherent in it, and so he takes um, this. What he discovers essentially is through the African mask. In the African mask, in primitive art, let's say, whatever you want to call it, we have, instead of a central point, instead of a spectrum of colors between two extremes, and therefore giving relative meaning to any of those colors. Instead of using these as our means to unification or expression, what we have is an archetypal, abstract context, something that all people share an understanding of. That becomes our path to expression. That becomes our path to unification. That unification, or the creation of this context, whatever it is, whether it's between colors or shapes or lengths or the whole out the whole context itself, whether it be what happens inside of time, the means to expression, the unifying factor, essentially the equivalent. That's in art, the equivalent in religion being of the extra mundane point of reference. What is the God? What is the infinity? What is the biggest thought that connects everything and therefore allows us to look at them as fundamental relationships, to look at them selflessly and therefore allow to be revealed between those patterns that we do not assume about or define the limitless meaning. So instead of it being a central point that unifies all, instead of it being shades of colors between white and black, it becomes the an archetypal object, something that all humans recognize. And that context, that abstract context, for example, the face, which is why it's the coming from the African mask, that can allow us to move all of the structures which are understood to be within that abstract context around in ways which can allow us to irrefutably, particularly map particular values and relationships between them by manipulating those variables which we expect inside of the archetypal context: nose, mouth, eyes, ears, eyebrows, forehead lines, whatever, hair, whatever it may be, chin, by this metaphysical concept that all things are only what they are, the truth and the meaning, by relationship, by adopting um, and using as our means to expression in our unifying context the face, for example, some archetypal thing, object that people understand, the guitar, the tree, um, the woman, etc., we are able to gain a limitless path to expression of meaning. We're able to manipulate any of the geometrical shapes, any of the actual components, the shape relationships, the structural relationships inside of that are the variables which constitute that archetypal object. And therefore, we can limitlessly express our own meaning, our unique value system. We can track and map the world which we've seen redefined in its values and meanings and potentials isomorphically onto that archetypal context. Um, we can map and track an irrefutably particular understanding of the world, how it was redefined, onto any archetypal object by, instead of what Cezanne did with analysis of his rigorous scrutiny, his means to acting in a way which reflected infinity, even though it was perhaps unconscious, was by finding out what he was seeing. It wasn't a mountain anymore. It wasn't a landscape with houses. It wasn't the clouds. It wasn't anything. It was exactly what is there, what shape, what line, what distance from this point. All seeing all things as relationships, which is how we do when we've reconciled infinity and consciousness. Um, so instead of that analysis, instead of analyzing the shading of all things, this from white to black, what's darker, what's lighter, just fundamental relationships, not defining anything, not assuming anything about anything, just seeing that rigorous scrutiny, pure vision. Um, this rigorous scrutiny should actually just in metaphysics, and if we achieve the religious function, it's just selfless giving praise. This is the same thing as rigorous scrutiny, but it's autonomous and derived from a sense of oneness and reconciliation of the limitlessness in and of all things. Um, Instead of that, uh, the cubist Picasso realizes through this example in the mask, if I manipulate any of the geometric structures, any of the fundamental shapes inside of this abstract context, that's the unifying point now, is the context, not a central point. It's actually the outside, not the inside. That everything in between it can be moved in a way which can be perceived by others as an irrefutably particular way of those things being related. And suddenly, what we get is the opportunity to manifest what we're discussing, that is, to express limitlessly. And we no longer preserve perspective. So they're doing it in like a single plane, and they're not really using color so much to be the means to expression. Again, between colors can arise the relative meanings because they're inside of this abstract context, white to black, and so everything is closer to this, further from that, more like this, very different than those. Relative meaning can arise between colors. That's a means to expression, just like rhythm in music or dance, or harmony or line or any of these things. These are all means to expression in art. So Picasso realizes through what how the primitive um, artist was achieving expression of some sort of perceivable meaning by manipulating the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the lips of inside of the mask, that if we were to treat some sort of archetypal understood context that we know, even if it looks very strange and different, that this is a woman, that this is a face, that this is a guitar, that this is a whatever. This is a bowl of fruit. Um, Unique light is fruit. Uh, it's the fruit of religion, and it's the bowl of fruit that so often becomes a still life, something that glows, not just a lemon. Um, we see that he can now, by analyzing rigorous scrutiny again, all of the components of a single thing, all of the shapes, the geometric structures of a thing, he can then manipulate those. He keeps the fundamental context, he keeps the abstract context. That's his central point, between which can now be moved any of the structures, any of the variables, the components, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the lips, the eyebrows, the forehead lines of whatever he's using, the components, the constitution, the geometric constitution of those things can be moved around in any way. And with each choice, with each variable switched, he shifts the meaningful plexus of relationships. He creates relationships, irrefutably particular, properties and qualities isomorphic between abstract variables and relationships between those parts, the breasts, the arms, the eyes, the ears, the objects that they're interacting with, and everything else. And in this way can map or track, can express and show, included in process, an irrefutably particular and infinite set of values and meanings and truths about these things. And we see that what is manifest, what Cubism results in, is this um, this expression regarding a single or defined thing, like a woman. Um, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. That's the prime example. It was actually this is, I mean, that's the birth of Cubism, but also we find African masks combined into the subjects that take on the first appearances of Cubism. Um, we see that um, it is our understanding of, like, oh, let's say a woman, or again, a guitar, whatever you want it to be, and you see, or a bowl of fruit, or a family, you see something, something that's predefined, let's say, something that consciousness holds and shares. That's part of the shared experience of the world. But what Cubism allowed by the manipulation of the geometric structures which constitute the archetype um, is there to be shown limitless perspectives. That is, unique meanings and understandings, identification with and regarding, unique light regarding this thing, or regarding the world and the universe and the self through this thing, this subject, whatever it may be. And so we see that the same principle that Picasso found, a metaphysical principle that all truths are only by relationship, inside of the African mask, was brought into Cubism, allowed him to take any subject and analyze it, look at it in a way reflecting infinity, look at it just as geometric relationships. And that once he did that, then he had complete freedom to manipulate all of those things in order to create a meaningful plexus that was irrefutably particular um, to himself, to show that each moment in the physical world, just as in the abstract world of his process of creation, all things were always changing in their meaning. And so he got to show that not only did that truth, metaphysical, allow him to express anything, to create literally an infinite plexus of relationships, meaningful and perceivable inside and through that subject's, our understanding of that subject as the central point, we could see the relative meaning of the change in what we might expect, and then through all the variables themselves, how they were related. But we can also see that what was shown was his ever-changing way in the abstract and the physical of being related, that he found again and again and again unique light, new meanings, new values, new truths every time he looked at every part and every aspect in both the physical and the abstract, regarding this thing, regarding the world itself. We see that the metaphysical principle, that this way of being related irrefutably particularly, is ever changing, and that's the limitlessness in the specific, actually gets to be shown gets embodied in the Cubist work because it shows that while there is this definition or consciously held archetype, every time we walk up to a tree, every time we walk up to another person, every time we walk up to an instrument, every time we walk up to a piece of fruit, that thing which we know is a lemon, which we know is a breast or an eye or a guitar, always is new. It's always irrefutably particular, and it's always changed its relationship to us and everything else. And so we always have the opportunity to come and have this limitless interaction with it, that we have the choice to be selfless. Um, it could be the Cezanne's rigorous scrutiny of the provided by the central point. It could be the rigorous scrutiny of the structures, geometric shapes of the cubist, but really it could be the autonomous interaction which reflects reconciliation of infinity and consciousness using the cross or Hermes transition and manifestations of indefinableness that can allow us to come into an interaction selfless with what the thing is, even if we know it's a person, even if we know it's a piece of fruit, we have a definition for it. We come into an interaction selfless, which is with its fundamental relationships. We look at it as patterns, and what arises before consciousness is a new meaning, unique light, the fruit of religion, which we need art to express, which we require some metaphysical principle like, oh, okay, all things are only what they are by their relationship. And that allows us to have limitless manipulation of variables within it in order to express the limitless meanings and values which we found, which are irrefutably particular and therefore inherently infinite. And so here, the cubist actually shows in their product this metaphysical principle that the thing that we see is seen from many perspectives, that what we're showing you in art is many different ways that a single thing could be received by a single person or interacted with or result meaningfully, and that is expressed, that is made perceivable in the isomorphic um, in the mapping isomorphic of the properties and qualities um, which were found in the world that inspired the work, um, between the geometric shapes inside of the abstract context. Um, Again, I failed miserably to keep things short. I don't mind. I hope you don't either. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Synthesis with the School of Smirk. I hope this can help you or guide you or inspire you in some way to begin or continue to look for how the teachings of religion are inherent in art and how art is a function within religion to express and include the infinite into expression, to allow us to enter into processes abstract or physical, which are justified as selfless and which result then in the inspiring, unique light, which is the revealing of our irrefutably particular way of being related to an infinite plexus which itself is ever changing, which equivocates energy, which knows that in the abstract, in the artistic realm, we're still in the life process. We're still interacting with things which we cannot define, which have equally limitless potential no matter their nature, their state, their appearance, for meaning, truth, consequence. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.